it always seemed, Richard, that my family was really, they were professional villainizers. Not when it came to me though, because even when I really didn't do something, they still blame me for it. But you bring up a good point, which is a lot of people are like, well, I'm not going to accept responsibility for the whole situation. You don't have to. You're accepting responsibility for your part, the part that you owned and played. And where I thought you were going to go with that, which is something that I talk about, is when you do that in a situation, it could be with your wife or a coworker or your boss. And when there's conflict, and the first thing you do is acknowledge, hey, listen, I could have handled that differently. I came in hot. I didn't mean to. What happens is it disarms the other person. Right? Because
are you tired of working more for less profits in your home service business? What if I could show you $100,000 in hidden annual profits in your business in less than 3 minutes? Would you be interested? And not only show you where, but how to create that 100K in 6 months or less without additional advertising or marketing spend guaranteed. Just go to sharpenthespearcoaching.com to see how truly simple it is. That's sharpenthespearcoaching.com. Do it now. And we are back on STS Sharpen the Spear podcast with another incredible guest. Chris Gillen is here. He's in the virtual house, and I am really looking forward to this conversation. We actually had to stop our conversation before we started the conversation because it was getting out of hand. So it's just, we're going to have a great time here. So Chris, as always, no one knows Chris better than Chris. Give us that backstory, bring us up to speed, and we'll get into it.
Yeah. Hey, Richard. So first off, thanks for having me on. It's been great. And yeah, you're right. Sometimes you forget to hit record in these moments, but thanks for having me on. My name is Chris Gillen, and I've been in the retail operations space for over 35 years. I grew up in it. I've worked for companies like Target, Home Depot, Toys R Us, always in leadership, operational, customer service capacities. And the last 5 years I was a CEO of a market research and data analytics firm. Stepped down as the CEO recently to build a new company around AI, voice-driven AI. But more importantly, stepped down to finish a labor of love project for me, which was writing a book called The Villain Trap. And it really talks about how leaders lose their effectiveness through blame and lack of ownership. And launched the book a couple of weeks ago. And now I'm just trying to get it out there and talk to people about it, really what it means to be a victimless leader and accept accountability and responsibility for things. So I'm excited to be here and happy to talk to you about it.
Yeah, it's great. So I'm excited for this too, and I was just thinking as you're saying this stuff, Chris, I'm like, these victims and this blame thing and all this, I never did that. Yeah. So for me, it's like foreign. It's a foreign concept to me because I was in the Marine Corps. You don't get to do that much there. Okay. None of that stuff, right? It's all personal responsibility. My parents raised me that way. And so I'm thinking, but you wrote a book on it because it's so prevalent.
It's so prevalent. Yeah. It's a problem. It's a problem, Richard. It's, and I grew up opposite of you. Unfortunately, I grew up in a household of what I refer to sometimes as professional victims, is that they just could not. My dad, bless his heart, man, and he was an Army guy. He could just never get out of what I refer to as the blame bubble of just never accepting ownership and accountability for his actions and his decisions. And he died at 54. That's my age. And he lived in that bubble for almost his whole entire life. And unfortunately got passed to my younger brother, who kind of fell into the same trap and ended up committing suicide when he was 32. And it's a terrible story, but the reality of that story is they never got to know their real story, right? Like, how good could they have been, because they never would accept responsibility. And I probably would have gone down that same road if it wasn't for somebody like my grandfather, who was a lot like you, Richard. He was fully accountable. He was a military guy. And he gave me the most valuable lesson I ever learned early in my life. A hard thing to hear, but what he said to me is, he says, listen, it is probably your fault. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, it is. We all play a role in every situation, and you have a part in that situation, and it's your responsibility to own it, to understand how you impacted that situation. That stuck with me, and it was something that I think kept me off the path that unfortunately my dad and brother went down. So when I say this is a labor of love book for me, it truly is.
Yeah, that's really something. I mean, it's so interesting in a family. I have 6 kids, okay?
Wow.
And they're just all different. I mean, you got my oldest is in the Marine Corps, super delayed gratification guy, man, goal focused, always like just so. I look at him at 20 years old, and we did a podcast interview together on a different show, and I'm like, dude, I was nothing like this at 20 years old, and I was in the Marine Corps. I was a goof. Okay, you are so dialed in. I'm like, there's my other kids. They all got their thing. It's all different. But that ability to ownership, because I'm big on that, so obviously I'm teaching my kids that. But even in a marital situation, it's always both. Okay, so it might be my wife be 3% and I'm 97%. I'll take that. Okay, or flip flop or whatever it is. But like, it's another thing you kind of understand that you do have to take that personal ownership, understand where that's at. But if other people do that as well, that's what creates kind of a nice balance, at least in a relationship standpoint. And I mean, in business too, not just a spousal thing, but yeah.
Yeah. We're, societally, man, we're broken, and we've been broken for a long time. And if you think about it, from a very early age, you're conditioned to not accept responsibility, right? You think about kids in school, and the teacher calls and says, little Johnny did something. The first reaction of a lot of parents is, not my child, right? And it sets the kid up to say, well, I'm never, as long as I don't accept it, as long as I don't say I did it, I'm good. And then, think about when you go to take your driver's test, or you go to driver's ed, what do they tell you if they get into a wreck? Never admit fault, even if it is your fault. So societally, we're conditioned to blame and to shirk responsibility. And one of the things that I like to talk about, and I talk about in this book, is that blame is like a drug. It's a drug because when you do mess up and you blame somebody else and you take the ownership off you, it feels good. It protects yourself, protects your ego. And then you look around and you say, oh, well, that was easy. Well, now the next time I screw up, or I do something, or I contribute negatively to a situation, all I have to do is blame somebody else. So it's inherent in us as humans. And my mission, although I'll never fulfill this mission, is to try to rid people of this drug of blame and let them know that you own your real story when you accept responsibility and accountability for your actions and your decisions.
Yeah, I think 2 things on that. First thing, when you flip that mindset and you get that, here's the thing, when you're saying that I'm going to accept the blame, that I'm going to take ownership, what happens is, and you may know more on this than I do, but I'm kind of thinking about this going, what it really does is it prevents you from doing these things, the wrong things. You have a different mindset how you approach something, right? Maybe you're a little more meticulous, maybe a little more caring on the outcome, maybe a little more focused on what's actually going on during the process. There's a higher level of accountability for completion, right? Because you understand who's responsible, right? And one other thing I'm thinking when you're saying this stuff on the blame, and when like school calls, I'm in like 5th grade or something, and I am a problem child. Okay. I am a clown. And so I'm in serious trouble. I'm in the principal's office kind of thing. So they called my mom. My mom comes rolling up. My dad's got this. We're talking 70s, right? Big old 4-wheel drive green pickup truck. And I think I'm screeching up, and I'm looking out the window. My mom gets out of that car. She comes in and she stops, looks at me and goes, I'll be right back with you. Yeah. And she goes in. There was no, my child, he couldn't have. It was like, I know this boy. Yeah. Get in the car. Get upstairs. So it's just,
it always seemed, Richard, that my family was really, they were professional villainizers. Not when it came to me, though, because even when I really didn't do something, they still blame me for it, but you bring up a good point, which is a lot of people are like, well, I'm not going to accept responsibility for the whole situation. You don't have to. You're accepting responsibility for your part, the part that you owned and played. And where I thought you were going to go with that, which is something that I talk about, is when you do that in a situation, it could be with your wife or a coworker or your boss. And when there's conflict and the first thing you do is acknowledge, hey, listen, I could have handled that differently. I came in hot. I didn't mean to. What happens is it disarms the other person. Right? Because the other person is ready for a fight. They're ready for you to go, it's not my fault, it's your fault. And the minute that you say, I'm accepting responsibility for my portion, it changes the dynamic of that relationship. And it's such a powerful, powerful tool when learned to be used correctly.
Yeah, it's a de-escalator.
It's a de-escalator.
That's what we do. We teach that. We do security and all this stuff, like at church and everything. But same thing. How do you de-escalate?
That's right.
And that technique is the way you do it.
That's exactly right.
You put it on you, because then they just, they want to be pushed, right? Someone wants it to go up so they can take that swing or do whatever they're going to do. And you gotta, this hand position, it's a whole thing. There's a whole body language technique and everything else we use, but I love it. I love that aspect because, so let's go this route, because again, I'm not shocked that people blame others. I mean, I've seen it all over the place, right? And I talk to people. I've been in multiple businesses.
Turn on your television.
Yeah, it's a lot of finger pointing on this stuff. And let's talk about company culture for a second, okay? Because that's a big thing, right? And it's a lot of people, though I always tell people, they'll come and tell you need to change your company culture as they walk out the door and have no suggestions whatsoever. Okay, so it's like, well, that's not very helpful, but it really is that kind of thing. And one thing that I do is I try to make everyone become a problem solver. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have this thing called the 3S. I learned that if there's an issue, it's state the situation, give me some solutions, and then give me your suggestion for the solutions, right? And that's one of my things that really helps people. Like, you don't get to come just panicking, running in my office saying there's a problem. Right? You got to, okay, here's what I think we should do. And I said, well, that might work, but C might be better than B, because if you take B, it might be this, and then they learn. Or you say, oh man, that's the ideal solution, man, go do it. Yeah. Like, right? So we cut the time down. We understand they took responsibility for this thing not working. So, and that's one of probably a gazillion techniques, right? But do you find that is because I know you're kind of good at the cultural shifting in these companies as well.
Well, that's how I framed the book. I mean, the book is designed for companies and for leaders. And when you boil everything down to its base foundation, and this is true of any relationship you have with anybody in your life, it is the foundation of that relationship is trust. I am not going to be vulnerable with you unless I feel comfortable doing that. And what you just talked about requires vulnerability on the person's side to be able to offer solutions or to think differently. And the problem you're seeing in corporate America right now, because so much is changing, right? The world is changing, everything. The problem you're seeing is what's happening is companies, in my opinion, and I can give you some examples, are villainizing their frontline employees. They're saying, you should be grateful you have a job, you do this, you do that. Employees are villainizing the company because they're not giving them enough, or they feel they're not giving them enough, and nobody's listening. And there is no amount of measurement or tools or resources you're ever going to implement in that company to fix it and to make it better unless you figure out how to come together organizationally. And the only way to do that is to remove blame, is to sit down and really own. Let me own what I should do. Let me own what you should do. There's a great example, recent example in the news. Of course, Starbucks has been in the news for the last 7-8 months. They're in real trouble. This is a company that never missed a quarterly forecast in their life, $35 billion. And now they're struggling. And there was this great article that came out about employees walking out because they now want them to wear black shirts. And they're asking the employees to go out and buy black shirts for these uniforms. And some of the employees apparently walked out. And now what you have is you have, on one hand, Starbucks saying, well, if you don't buy it, go find a job somewhere else. You have the employees now saying, well, look, I'm making $15 an hour. I'm trying to feed my family. You know, a $5 or $10 shirt doesn't sound like, but it's the principle of the thing. You're forcing me to do that. Here you are making $35 billion. Right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm not advocating for one group or the other, but what's happened is Starbucks is going to have a real hard time getting back on track because everything that they need happens in the stores. They're frontline employees. If I'm not happy and healthy, and if I don't feel good, and if I don't trust the company I'm working for, do you think service is ever going to get better? No, it isn't. And that's the problem. That's how it infects these organizations and these companies without them realizing it.
Yeah, you know, it's staying on the Starbucks thing. We have two now, but we have a local one here. I've been going for 15 years, and great manager. She's gone now, opened another store, and you got the new one, and she's literally sitting at the table because they're really struggling to get people to come back inside.
Yes.
Remember, it used to be the third place, right? That was their whole thing. And COVID, like they chased everybody out.
That's right.
They chased everybody out. I hadn't been back since. So I went somewhere, but now I go back in and there's this new younger manager sitting at a table. Everyone's working behind the counter and she's berating these people, berating them like loud across all, like, and I'm looking at her, I'm standing going, this how you treat the people you manage?
That's right.
I go, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
She's like, well, you don't understand. I go, oh, I understand.
Yeah.
Way better than you know. And I just see it all the time. And the attitude, I'm like, wow, this is, it's an interesting dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like they're trying to do this one thing, but I think you're right. They've divided the team. You know what I mean? That the front line.
You're seeing the same thing at Target. The first 15 years of my career I spent at Target Corporation, and I love that company. I never ever thought I would leave. And I hate to see what's happening to it now because it didn't used to be that way. But it's the same thing. What you have is you have leadership who is blaming problems on the front line and the stores and the people. You have the people working in those stores not feeling seen, heard, valued, or nurtured from the company. And so they're not motivated to come in and give their best. They're just going to show up, collect their paycheck, and they're going to go home. And you can do whatever you want to do to try to fix that until you address it. It's never, ever going to get better. If you look at some of the best companies that have been around, then you see a strong, loyal workforce, kind of leaning into that company because they feel valued, seen, and heard. And it's a real problem. And, your Starbucks example is great because what you've had happen there is you've had a manager blame the employees for whatever issues, problems, or concerns that they're having. And I'm not saying that there's not bad employees at all, right? What I'm saying is what people need to do, because our egos are big, right? And we don't like to admit fault. We don't ever like to say we are wrong. So your ego will start to develop this story and paint this story for you. Well, it's not my fault. It's Richard's fault because Richard does X, Y, and Z, right? And then you justify that. You start thinking about little things, and I make you the villain of the story. And then the dynamic changes, right? And then I'm treating you differently. I'm not treating you the same way that I used to. And eventually either I let you go or you leave because we're just not on the same page. And there's 5 words that I tell people that are the most powerful words you can say to yourself when you feel that happening is, what else could be true? And those are really important things because it breaks the cycle of that story you're building in your mind. And it allows you to take a step back and go, okay, what else is going on here? And that's where self-reflection starts. That's where you as a leader say, you know what? Maybe I haven't shown up. Maybe I haven't trained them properly. What can I do differently in the situation? And imagine that leader going, instead of yelling and treating them like you saw, imagine that leader going to the staff and sitting them down and say, listen, I'm going to own something. I don't think I've done enough to support you because these things are happening. What can I do differently? And then what that does, it disarms those employees. What are they going to say? Right? They're going to say, well, here's what you can do. And they're going to be enforced, whether they acknowledge it or not, to admit their role in the story. And that's when authentic repair can begin. When you recognize what you've done and I've recognized what I've done. So we get that out of the way. Now we can focus on repairing the relationship. And that's the important part of it.
Yeah, so true. I see all these different, because I deal with so many businesses, and I'll give you another kind of real world example. A brother-in-law of mine, he's a little bit younger, but he works at a company. And I remember he was over one day and he's complaining about the grace period for being late, how many minutes you get.
Yep. Okay.
It used to be 7, now it's 3, and he's doing all this stuff and he's rambling on about this. And Chris, I go, can I ask you something? Or actually I want to make a little statement here. You're so focused on how much time you get to be late. I haven't heard you one thing about being early.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like what?
There you go. It's a great
I've never thought about the punishment for being late because I'm never late. Okay. I'm like, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're 20 minutes late. Yeah. Right. That's like my mindset, the old, whatever. But I'm hearing him, and how old is he? Is he 30 now? Yeah, late 20s, early 30s. And I'm like, I go, do you see what I'm saying? Like, you're all concerned. Then you're concerned about this manager not doing this and he doesn't do this. I go, who cares? That's not your responsibility, man. Get to work early, do what you got to do, get it done. I mean, obviously there's problems or whatever, but that mindset, sometimes you have to deal with that as well. Okay. This is another cultural thing. What does that establish? People just can't roll in whenever they want. Right. But it's just a fascinating thing. So I love kind of like throwing these things out there and what are we actually dealing with? You know, how do we bring this together from a self-ownership standpoint?
Yeah.
Right. Like,
well, one of the things I talk about in the book is, and this is why I've called it a trap, because it really is a trap. And everybody, I don't care your gender, your race, your creed, everybody does this every day. We tell ourselves stories that villainize other people or things in an effort to make us feel better. And because that's what we need to do. And so the really important part is, how do you identify so that you don't fall into that trap? But the bigger part of it is what I refer to as the ownership cycle. Like in this case, is it's awareness, it's reframing, it's ownership and action. Those are the four kind of things. And awareness is that really important ability to recognize you're going into the trap. You catch yourself. You're like, wait a minute, I'm starting to form a story here about Richard, and my ego is telling me this story, and he's painting you as the villain, Richard, because it's certainly not my fault. So you got to catch yourself there. And then you got to reframe. And that's where those, what else could be true comes into play. You take a step back and you say, okay, I'm building this story that Richard is just a big jerk. But let me pull back and go, what else could be true? Maybe Richard's just having a bad day. Maybe something happened with Richard. Maybe Richard's dealing with stuff that I have no idea he's dealing with, right? So you pull yourself out of that, and then you got to own your part. That's that ownership. So then I have to say to you, whatever our situation is, hey, Richard, I shouldn't have done what I did. I recognize that my action probably didn't come across the right way to you, and I'm going to fix that going forward, right? So that's that. You're offering up that olive branch to a certain extent. You're owning your part. And then what you'll end up doing, in some cases, not all cases, you should come back and go, thank you for that. I guess I could have done this differently. Right. And now the relationship has reached a point where you can really focus on action, that authentic repair. How do we rebuild it? Okay, Richard, I'll tell you what, next time, this is what I'm going to do. And then you're going to say to me, you know what, Chris, that's great. Next time I'm going to do this. And then we can begin to move down the road together. That's how it works. But when you fall into the trap and you don't do those things, then I just paint you as the villain. I pin all of my shortcomings and lack of accountability on you. And then the relationship is damaged forever. And it's not just leadership. We're talking about home. We're talking about in your church, anywhere that you have relationship. This is potentially what happens.
Yeah, and what happens is that becomes, like you're saying, that's the go-to. You start to stack.
You do.
You're stacking stuff on that person that you were able to blame, right? And now you just start stacking it, and they become like villains, too nice of a word.
Yeah.
It's like they just, the way I hear, like I'll hear these people talk about the people they work with. So it's a perfect example. I'm like, dang, even my son was working a place, and I just finally told him after like 2 years, like, you don't need to be there. It's not it's so, I hate using the word, but it's such a toxic culture. Yeah. Like, you got to go. Yeah. Like, this is not, this is like battered woman syndrome. Yeah. You get abused today. Maybe I'll see you at 5 a.m. tomorrow. They're all nice to get you to come back. Then the cycle starts over again. I'm like, it's all that kind of stuff, these people. And so let me ask you this on this kind of thing, because leadership right now, as a podcast host in business podcast, like there's no shortage of people want to talk about leadership. Okay. Just saying. Yeah. Okay. It's out there. I'm very selective, and I'm not blowing smoke here for you, Chris. I wouldn't just bring anyone on to talk about leadership. Yeah. Okay. Like, it matters. Yeah. It does. Okay. I need actionable stuff. Yeah. Because this is my own theory. Okay. That I've come up with. Yeah. You know why there's so many leadership coaches and people? Because I call it AT. It's all talk. All talk. They just talk about it. And they can throw out these little concepts and these theories and all this stuff. And I'm like, I need rubber on the road. Yes. Like you got 30 years doing this stuff. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I need someone who's like, has a book, identifies this stuff, has the resolution to alter culture, heal relationships, stuff like that, right? So that matters. So I got to dig through the weeds myself just for a guest, right? because there's so much out there. So there's a whole lot of bad leadership out there. And now there's a whole lot of bad leadership coaches.
That's very true.
So here we are, but we're not. You're totally great. Your stuff kind of really comes together. I love it. I like talking about this because we're always about actionable steps.
Yes.
Chris, we always want something that's actually applicable.
Yeah.
I don't mind high views. That's really cool, but you got to bring it down. And again, rubber meets the road. Here it is. This is how we go forward.
I've tried to live my life as a leader, as a servant leader. I was young in my career. I was very fortunate to work for some very, very genuine, honest, good people who taught me very early on that it is not about me. It's about the people around me. And in my last company as the CEO, and people would always say, oh, no, this isn't true. I said, listen, I am the least important person in this company. And they're like, what do you mean? And I said, I have an easy job. And the job is just to set the strategy and the vision for the company, right, where we're headed. And then what I do is I hire the best people and I nurture them and I support them and I love them. And I do all the things that I can do to bring out the best in those people. And I give them all of the credit because I don't need any credit for that. I'm just there. What can I do today to make your job easier? How can I make you better? And that's the kind of leadership that I think is really the leadership that nurtures and grows people in the process. And I think what you're kind of referring to is there are unfortunately a lot of people out there today that are what I call look at me leaders, right? I'm the best, I'm the brightest. Without me, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't even know what to do. And my goal with this book I told you, I'm on a mission to get rid of blame. And I know I'll never do that, but I'm certainly going to try. But my mission is to help leaders at all levels, regardless of where you are, understand that if you're leading people, that is your role. Your role is to grow them and nurture them and be the best possible resource you can for them. And when you do that, results come. That's why I used to tell people all the time, is like, I like to believe that there's something that I refer to in the book as presence over performance. And what that says is we all have targets and goals and objectives we have to hit because it's just part of business. But if you make that the only priority and you push people hard towards that, you might achieve those results, but they won't be sustainable. And if you lead with presence and you align with people and you're clear with people, those results will come. Because I've never led a team in that way where they weren't effectively able to produce those results. So that's that mentality that we need to change both at work and at home, that it's okay to be vulnerable, that it's okay to say, I don't know, but you surround yourself with wonderful people and you nurture them and you take care of them and grow them, and they will take care of everything else. I guarantee it.
Yeah, I'm with you completely on that. The servant leadership is something my first 20 years in business can't really say I did well. Okay. What I realized was I hired people kind of like me. And guys working, my foreman, and it was kind of easy because we all wanted to work and we like working and we all showed up early. And I just, by the grace of God, I got the right people. Yeah. Right. And we did amazing things and they were able to do that. But as I get older, as I started over, right, 08, 09, did all that stuff, I start learning it's kind of the really great leaders have to create more leaders.
Yes.
Right. That's really the goal, is to create more leaders inside the company. You as the CEO doing that, being present and all that. That's the time to create new leaders. But if your leadership isn't dialed in, okay, all you're doing is transferring bad habits.
That's it.
Mismanagement, bad leadership, and you're just giving it to the next person who's probably the girl in Starbucks screaming over the counter. She probably had a bad leader above her, and there you go, right? So I see it, and it's something to really think about. And when I learned, I have to develop leaders, talk about taking ownership. I'm like, am I qualified? I started really thinking, am I really? I train a lot of people in a lot of different things, and I teach, and I do this, but can I really build leaders? I really had to start thinking about that. What are my qualifications for that?
Yeah.
Yes, I've run businesses for 35 years, but I don't know if that qualified me to be a good leader, Chris. Yeah. I've really had to question that,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I don't, I don't know if we all start out as great leaders. I mean, I think it's something that you influenced by those around you will determine your kind of leadership style, like how you were raised, what company and what leadership setting will determine kind of, what's right and what's wrong for you. But, I'm in agreement. It's just it's changing how people think about their role as a leader. Like I said, is that in the book I talk about, if you make yourself the hero of the story all the time, you're probably not an effective leader. What you should be doing is make those around you the hero of the story, right? And it's not to say you can't say things like, I did a good job or whatever. That's not your role, though. Your role is to, there was a guy I worked with, and he had this great saying. He said, my role is chief impediment remover. And my goal is just to ask you, what can I help you with? What obstacles can I remove for you? How can I lower the barrier? How can I make you go faster? That is the essence in my mind of a good leader, somebody who's there for you. And there's something in the book, my favorite chapter in the book is chapter 9, because what I say is up to that point, you could have read the book and say, no, this isn't me. I don't do this, right? But when you get to chapter 9, you realize that if you've ever been a leader, and this applies to you, Richard, I guarantee you with the utmost certainty, you have been a villain in somebody else's story. Somebody has
Sure.
villainized you as the leader and blamed their shortcomings and their problems on you. And sometimes you know that, and sometimes you don't. And the worst thing that can happen is, because you can't control whether somebody's going to villainize or not, but part of this book is recognizing when that happens. There's a great story in the book about a guy named Rob, and he has a bad leader, and the leader doesn't even know, right? The leader just thinks he's a great leader, but Rob builds up resentment and all this stuff, never says anything, and then eventually he leaves, and the leader never knows why. And then later, they meet, and Rob says to the leader, well, I left because of you. And the leader says, I have no idea why. And then he begins to spell these things out. And the leader never knew, wasn't intentional, right? Just never knew. And that's a really important story, because all leaders, I guarantee you, I'm a villain in many stories for people. Some I probably know and some I probably don't. But that's the essence of knowing that that's a possibility for you as a leader, and then working a framework on how to identify that and how to stop that, especially with employees that you don't want to lose.
Yeah, I have the real world story of that. Okay. So I got this great crew, been with me for years. They're amazing. Hired a project manager. We'll call him Larry. Okay. So Larry's running the deal. I'm doing other stuff now, right? Everything's growing. I think everything's going well. All of a sudden, my guys come in, we quit.
Wow.
The whole crew, they're done. I mean, they've been with me. I'm like, well, what's that about? And then I'm like, and they don't tell me why. They just go to another company, right?
Yeah.
We built water features. So they went for that. And I'm like, I'm looking at my officers like, what is going on? What did I do? Like, we're tight, man. You know what I mean? I taught them everything. I worked with them. And so we didn't know. And it took like 6 months. So about 6 months later, I realized it was this project manager. So I'm bringing other guys on, like, he's doing this. I'm like, so I had to bring him in and like, dude, I got to let you go. And we had the whole thing. But again, there's me not paying attention.
Yeah.
But a year later, my guys came back just to talk to me one day. And I go, Larry's not here. Oh, he's not? Can we come back?
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, heck yeah, you can. They all came back, right? It was like, and I'm like, listen, but I'm going to tell you, you can come back because I want you, but don't ever not talk to me. How can you just not, but it was like, they're Hispanic and I'm white. He's white. Maybe there's that whole thing, but I'm like, but dude, we got time in the game together, man. Like, we suffer with each other, man. You're like my family.
Yeah.
Like, you don't ever get to do that again. You don't ever leave and not tell me, talk to me at least, And they said, 5 more years and it was all good, So I lost everything and I wrecked everything.
But it's not intentional, right? Sometimes
right.
You hear a lot about safe spaces and creating safe spaces for people. And I think it's gotten kind of a bad rap, right? Because it feels namby-pamby, if you will, but it really isn't. Well, all it is saying, can you create a space for me to be my authentic self and to say what I need to say without fear of reprisal? And fear of reprisal doesn't always happen because somebody's mean or they know they're going to get yelled at. It's just, do I feel comfortable speaking up, and do I feel comfortable saying something? And that's a really important part of leadership, is to be able to create an environment where people, They're not just going along to get along. There's some chapters in the book where I talk about silence. We've all been in rooms as leaders with teams, and we've asked questions and nobody responds. They just sit there. And they know the answer, and they know how to respond, but they don't. And savvy leaders that live the no villain life, would look at that situation and say, okay, what am I doing wrong here? I mean, I should have an environment where I ask a question and I've got to shut them up, right? And that's not the case. And so being able to analyze that and look at that and really understand, okay, what do I need to do differently? Because you're coaxing the best out of those employees. And the way you do that, it's just like, farmers. You have to have the till of the soil. You have to have the right seed. You have to have the right environment for things to grow. It is no different when you're sitting in the boardroom. You have to have that same mentality. And to do that, you've got to learn not to villainize.
Yeah, it's like giving others permission, right? I guess that's the easy way to say it. They have to have the permission to do these things. What we do a lot with businesses, or do with every business, is we build these different lanes for every position, right? So we have all their functions, we have how they do it, training, but we also have the full expectations. We have consequences. We go through all these stages, that ability to talk to us. Who do you go to? Creating. That's one thing I liked about the military, especially the Marine Corps, is that chain of command was really, it is really something. You go to the next person above you and then continue up that ladder till you get the problem solved. And you're allowed to do that. Now you're always going to get the vindictive, whatever, this guy, that guy, but that's the process. So, you get up to the sergeant major of the Marine Corps. Yeah. Okay. If you had to, you can go all the way to the top if you need to, right? Never really happens. Right. But that ability to kind of build that. So I kind of put that in my company. I want that process. So people know where to go and how do you address these things, and not like it's in a manual somewhere. Like it's talked about a lot. It's reminded a lot. Like, because if you've got that kind of open door policy in that way, it's very effective for the company, right. At all levels. Yeah.
I try to remind companies and leaders that harmony includes voices. And what that means is you want to hear people. You want them speaking up, even at the risk of you going, it's Richard again. He's always got something to say. That's healthy, though. That's healthy that you're in there. Silence hides them. And that's why, anytime I was ever in a room with people and I knew I was around people that should be comfortable and that want to speak up, and I asked a hard question and they didn't respond, or there was, tension in the air, it would be easy to go, you guys, you never speak up and you never say anything and you need to do this. You have to look at yourself as the leader. You've created this environment. Like, it's easy to say you didn't and that you do everything right, but the reality is you take ownership for it and you say, okay, I'm not doing something right. I'm not doing something that makes people feel comfortable. I've got to own that piece of it. And that's how you really start to hear people's voices, which you need in every company from every employee, because you're not the guy typically doing the job. It's everybody else. That's why I say in retail in particular, if one day all those Starbucks people just said, we quit, and they just literally walked out of their thousands and thousands of stores and did something different, Starbucks is dead. Doesn't exist. So it's not the CEO and the leadership team that are running things. They certainly play a very important role, but it's the girl you talked about, or the barista on the front line that's doing it. And when we lose sight of that, and we start treating people lesser because of their positions, your business, and I don't care what you do, will never, ever survive long term.
I'm with you, Chris. We do a thing called strategic vision, which we create for the company. It's what we're going to achieve in the next 18 to 24 months. But in it is part story and reality, but it shows where every single person is the hero in that part of the customer journey inside the company, right? When what we're doing. And when they see that, I'm telling you how powerful this is. It's 6-10 pages for what we get out. We read it. We have the owner to actually read it to the team, and they've got a copy and they highlight with it. People come to tears because they see the purpose they now have. I mean, I would have never believed that. Yeah. Okay. Back in the day, but you show them we're all working towards it and we're always going to be coming back to this. Yeah. This isn't a mission statement on the wall. We walk by, it becomes wallpaper. Yeah. This is how we operate. If you have to be let go, it's not literally going to be, well, not technically because you're incompetent. You're not fulfilling the strategic vision.
Yes. Yeah.
right?
No,
You may be incompetent, but the real reason is, you're not part of this. You're not part of the vision.
you're not
You,
part of
you're
it.
you're
And
you're holding us
that's,
back, right?
we all need a purpose. Everybody needs a
Yep.
purpose. We need something
Everybody.
big. I always say we need something bigger than just a paycheck. We need to know the value that we're adding. How are we contributing? And smart companies figure out how to do that. The smart companies figure out how to connect every employee, no matter where. There's always the great story about, JFK in the space race where they went to NASA, going to the moon. They talked to the janitor, right? And said, "What do you do here?" And he says, I'm helping put a man on the moon, but you're a janitor. Well, that guy knew what he was doing and how it fit into the bigger picture. And so
Right.
many companies forget that. They just say, go along to get along versus taking the opportunity to really sit down and help people kind of understand. And there's something in the book that a quote that I really enjoy, and it's great leaders don't pause to wallow, they pause to align. And that means that I'm not sitting in my own self-pity saying, "Oh, nothing's right, I can't do anything, blah, blah, blah." They actually take the time to align every single person so they understand where they fit in to the bigger picture. That's purpose.
I'm telling you, it's the number one thing. So I always say it's purpose, it's recognition, quality feedback, and then quality pay.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
in that order.
Yeah,
That
totally.
this is if you can't master the purpose, I want people to like want to come to work.
Yes. Yes.
So to me, anyone on my team is not complaining about the grace period for when you're late.
Yes. No,
That
no.
should never. They don't want to because they're there early. They're getting after it. They
That's
just
right.
love it, So
Yeah. So
yeah.
somebody asked me about how would you define success as a senior leader, and I said, look, if 90% of the time, because it can't be 100, if 90% of the time you wake up every day excited to come to work, you understand your purpose, you love working here, you love the people that are around you, you know the value you're contributing and to the company, and you feel seen, heard, and nurtured, that's all I need to do. Everything else will take care of itself, I guarantee, because those people will walk on hot coals to fulfill your KPIs and your objective and your goals. That's why it's so important that we get back to a place where we're embracing each other, right? We're not drawing lines and saying, I'm better than you, you're better than me. We're embracing each other and we're saying, we can work together. We can build a culture where everybody at all levels understands the mission. And as long as I'm treating you the way that I should be treating you, the way that I want to be treated, then your company will grow. I've never seen a company that had a culture like that didn't. It's proof.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's so good because again, as the leader, owner of the business, right? Whatever CEO, wherever you want, whatever title you want, these are your responsibilities, right? This is what you have to own. You have to own all that too.
That's right.
Right. It's your fault when there's
That's
a
right.
breakdown out there. I mean, this is kind of a mindset that, and some people say, well, you're a little obsessive on that. Well, not really, because if I'm always thinking that way, right, there's constant improvement in my company. Right. Okay. There's innovation in my company because I'm thinking that, right? Like this is my thing. But what we teach too, one of my goals for a lot of the, I deal with the service and trades industry, is to get them working on what we call their 5%, the 5% of the business only they can do. Right. So think about what we're talking about here today, and that's part of your 5%, right? You're working on vision, working on growth, but you're working on, the complete ownership and making all that stuff work. Only you as the top guy can make that happen. When one of my kids works at a fast food place and the owner is relatively absent, you can see all the issues in this large chain. Yep. His name's Bill. I'm always like, starts with you, Bill, every time I see him. I always like throw it out to go like, this you got, and it's funny. It's kind of the fast food. I call it the fast food model. You got high school kids. Okay. They're doing the little grunt work. Then you've got seniors. Okay. They're also doing, then you got some, and I'm just going to be funny about this. Then you got these middle-aged managers who are yelling at everybody. They're just angry because they're only there in the middle of their life. So it's just this whole thing, and kids walk out because they don't care. And it's like, and it's just, you watch that. It's like, it's watching like an ant colony that has no direction.
Yeah.
No ant knows what to do when they all know what to do without
Yeah.
being told. But it's like just ant chaos.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it looks like when you go there.
I believe, Richard, we were talking this a little bit before, that humanity, and I know this is going to sound grandiose, but humanity is an inflection point right now. And if you think about what's happening in the world, the birth rates declined for the last 15 years. People aren't having kids. General well-being and happiness at work is at an all-time low. Customer satisfaction's at an all-time low. You've got all of these things, and then you've got this technology like AI that's just ripping through society and changing the very nature of how we think about everything. It's akin to what happened in the Industrial Revolution. So everything is changing, right? And the world is going to look so much different next year and the year after. But the one thing that we all should be focused on is elevating our humanity. It's how do we work together? Somebody asked me, because I'm in the AI business too. Somebody said, do you think AI will destroy humanity? And my response to that was, AI is going to help us improve and do a lot of things that we currently don't do today. The one thing we don't need any help with is destroying humanity. We have that locked.
That's what I was going to say.
Do that on our own.
Yeah,
That's my point. My point is, and I hear this now where companies are coming out and saying, well, if you don't like it, we'll just replace you with AI, right? And I've always been a fan that AI should be an enhancer, not necessarily a replacer, unless it's replacing things that are counterproductive to humanity. I ran call centers all over the world. I've never met anybody in any country, agent, that loves sitting in a little cubicle answering the same call over and over and over again. It's not healthy, right? But replacing that person with AI and then having that person go do something more meaningful, that should be the goal as we're thinking about how we implement AI in our businesses. So that's my point, man. We got to get back to a place of love and respect and nurturing each other and get away from this mentality that I'm better than you or I have more than you. Because if we don't, I get really nervous about where that's taking us.
Well, I think, Chris, what we need to do, and I'll use AI as kind of the example and the human capacity. All the things you just said, what we're lacking now, right? All the stuff in the human endeavor, if you will, all the disconnection, all the distrust, all this kind of stuff. You can use this tool, AI, and use that. Like, you can win in business by having incredible customer service. How do I do that? Okay, I'm always about the differentiator when I work with businesses. I just look and go, well, what's everyone else doing? Okay, we're going to do none of that.
Yeah.
Okay, because most things they do, it's like, hey, look, they're all the same. I do real quick studies. Like, let's look at all the companies. Well, look, all they do is talk about themselves. Yeah. They never talk about their customers. Let's talk about their customers. Let's talk about their pain. Let's show them the outcomes. And we do this stuff. And so take these tools like AI agents. There's so many things now, but and work and help your people utilize those, contribute to that, and make it a multiplier. Make it a multiplier for you. It doesn't mean you got to get rid of people necessarily, right? But again, there may be shifts, and there's all the predictions. 300 million people are going to lose their jobs and whatever.
It's your military term, man. Make it a force multiplier, because that's what it absolutely can be done correctly.
And we have to understand that, because like I told you before we even hit record, was I want to be the guy in control of the levers. I'm not throwing my hands up saying I'm going to be out of business in 2 years. I'm going, how do we use this the right way?
Yeah.
And I've seen it. I've seen companies using this. I'm like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, it is great. I mean, I just see all the advantages to it, and not in the way of like, good, I get to get rid of 5 people.
Yeah.
It's like, look what this can do for my
look what
business.
It can do for you. Yeah. And I think that's where everybody's struggling. Will it replace jobs? Yes, it will. But I look at it and say a lot of those jobs are not jobs people enjoy anyway, right? So it frees you up and gives you an opportunity to do something different. And we're always talking about destroying jobs or taking jobs away. What about all the jobs it's going to create that we don't even know? Like, if you go back to, the 1800s when the steam engine came out, it was the same thing. People were, my God, it's going to destroy everything. It's going to do this, but it made things better. And jobs came out of it that didn't exist prior to that. And I believe the same thing is on pace for AI. Is there's going to be so many different jobs that we don't even know about now, as a result of the AI advancement, that if we do it correctly and we frame it correctly, it can be a force multiplier.
Yeah, I think I came up with this. I was talking with on the show yesterday with someone. They said, I'm going to give you the one word I think is going to be the most like relevant word ever going down the line in a few years. It's going to be, and for good and bad, unintended consequences. Because you can't predict this stuff. There's going to be so many great things. There's going to be the bad thing, but like you just said, we have, when something is doubling and tripling in speed in like weeks and days, you're like, you can't predict anything. Like to do anything beyond 12 months right now, like I'm like, I can't. There's no point. I got a 12-month plan.
Yeah.
Okay. Because then I'm going to have to completely reset.
Yeah.
It's going to be beyond pivots. You're going to be doing 90s.
Yes.
Okay. You're going to be turning, just forget the pivots. This is going to be 90-degree turns. This is going to be a full zigzag all the way up the road. But it's going to be good if you embrace it as every problem's an opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, these challenges are going to be really good for those who are on point, creating the leadership to handle this stuff. That's to right. Kind of bring it back full circle That's here. Right. Like we have to create, and we can touch on this real quick before we wrap this up, but like leadership training.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris, like in a company, like there has to be some level of that, right? Like, and I don't mean you got to have 500 people and create a program. I mean, what if you've got 10, 20 people in the company? Like, again, leaders are supposed to be creating leaders, but there has to be some kind of regimented training process to do it right.
Yeah.
Do you talk about that in the book at all?
I don't talk about training necessarily in the book. What I talk more about is leadership expectations. And I think that's what companies miss. Like if you're hiring me as a district manager or regional manager, and I have 10 years of leadership experience, then that basically says I understand the basic principles of leadership. And we always say, well, leadership is leadership is leadership. It's not necessarily true. What you have to do when I come to your company is tell me how I should be leading. What is the nature of my leading? Am I a servant leader here? Am I somebody that you just say you're directive and you go out and do that? And I think that's where companies fall short is I hire you because I believe you're a leader and I throw you out there without any expectation. You're going to lead the way that you've been trained to lead. And that may or may not fit into my culture. And that's why I say companies should really have these structure around the type of leaders I'm looking for, right? Because it's not a one size fits all. And there are some arguably businesses that probably need the leaders who are more direct and not as servant based, right? Because I'm not saying that servant leadership is definitive and it's going to work everywhere, but companies need to set those expectations. And more importantly, they need to role model those. You can't, as the CEO of the company, say, I want you to be a servant leader, Richard. I want you to do these things. And then me operate completely opposite of that. And so that is what I would say more. It's less to me about training at this stage of the game and more about expectations and role modeling the behavior internally.
Yeah, I agree with that, Chris, for sure. I think there just has to be some attention to it, like you're saying.
Absolutely. But
like you said, there's got to be lanes. There's got to be examples. The role play, I love that. You've got to fit the right person in the right place. Everyone's not. There's management is all levels and departments and areas, and to get certain things done in certain places, you got to do it certain ways.
You got to do it a certain way.
Some people have bigger boots than others. That's true. What I mean for That's kicking. True. But it's just the things you got to do. So I love it. Yeah, I really like that. I think the focus really, what your book does is really kind of not just, shifting that blame game, kind of taking the ownership on that too, but really about laying out a plan for leadership.
Listen, Richard,
I think it's bigger than just that.
Yeah. I've heard from people, full transparency, that this is a hard read, and not because it's hard to read, because it's self-reflective. It's going to force you to look at yourself in a mirror and force you. And if you use the book as I intended, because there's check boxes in the book, it's a workbook, really. If you really allow yourself and open yourself up to say, I'm going to read it, and I'm not going to have bias. I'm just going to read it. And then really reflect on you and your leadership style and how you've been impacting other people. It will resonate with you if you allow it. But I've already had people to tell me, I'm too afraid to read it. And I'm like, why are you too afraid to read it? Because I don't
Because
know
it's
if I'm
me.
ready to really look at myself that way.
I had a client say a similar thing. Is we're talking about delivering a world-class experience, okay, in his business. He goes, I don't know if I that's a high bar. I don't know if I can do that. And I'm like, come on, man, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But really, people have these fears, and when you call them out, and we've all been there, right? I've been called out on a whole lot of things, If you're married, you've been called out.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just put that out there, right? We've all been called out at one time or another, and it's the natural reaction is to push back.
Yeah.
No, that wasn't, but it's that, we talked about it earlier when you're talking about that willingness to go, I dropped the ball here. I did this, did that. Yeah. That is way harder than you think.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know this, Richard, as a man, and I think this is really difficult for men versus women, is that we've been raised to think vulnerability is weakness. And it isn't. It really, really isn't. It's maturity is what it is to me. When you can, and it's the essence of being a man, right? Because we need to know when we've made a mistake and when we're wrong. And we can't be afraid to admit that, because that's where healing begins. And I think there's you just talked about at home. I put a bonus chapter in the book called The Villain Trap at Home. And it addresses this exact same thing about your children and your wife and how we villainize the people that we love. And we do it every day. So how do you keep yourself from doing that? How is it you show up as the leader of the house and not be afraid to be vulnerable when you need to be vulnerable?
I think, Chris, what it is when people are taking that responsibility or accepting, like, hey, I dropped the ball, I did that. Here's the problem, I think, and I'm kind of just doing this in my head now, but a lot of times they begin to think less of themselves.
Yes.
Okay.
Totally.
Like, I'm a failure here. I dropped the ball. That's what you have to stop doing as a type A personality. Well, I may be that. Pretty sure I am. Okay. I've been told. Okay. But you can't, you have to, because you're not that. You understand that's that's a, what would you call it? It's just it's an event. It's like an event. This happened. I didn't do this right. That's it. It's not a shortcoming on me. Right. It's like the old saying, there's a great definition of humility, which falls into the servant leadership. It's, humility isn't thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less.
Yes, that's exactly right.
That's what it's about. That's what we're talking about here, right? Because if you're going to beat yourself up because you didn't get the exact outcome you wanted, or someone was offended or whatever, like, if that becomes like a negative to you all the time, you're going to be doomed. You're going to be a poor leader. You're not going to be able to lead, because leadership requires some really difficult decisions at a lot of different stages, right? And if you're worried about doing something wrong all the time, you're going to be an ineffective leader. You are. I'm all about make the decision, go. If it's wrong, we'll fix it.
Yeah.
Okay, but you have to decide.
You know what, Richard? The higher you move up on the ladder, the higher your stature, the higher the level of position, the more you surround yourself in the blame bubble, and the more you're not willing to accept ownership and accountability because it's too risky for you. Think of every CEO you can think of, right? They miss quarterly forecasts. They're going to come out, they're going to play market forces and tariffs and all this. I'm not saying that those don't contribute. They certainly do. But I always look for the leader that says, yes, all of these things we believed impact their business, but I need to do something differently. It's no different if you're a sports fan when you see the coach after the team is lost. And there's coaches that blame the team. Oh, they just didn't perform well today. And then there's coaches that say, you know what? I didn't do what I needed to do to help you win.
That's right.
Those are accountable leaders.
Right. I love it. So we didn't hit this real hard, the accountability aspect, but just know that's like one of those, that's a $5 word, accountability.
Yeah.
Like you gotta have it. That's a big part of all of this, right? And that's really what it is.
Yeah.
And if you need to put accountability in place as a leader, get those people, right? We do it in our friendships.
Absolutely.
Get the guy who's going to call me out if I'm trying to overcome a bad habit or whatever. Like that you have to surround yourself with people who are willing, who have the stones to hold you accountable. Well, if you're going to be accountable just to yourself, it's difficult.
Right. Yeah. We, look, when you're upset about something, what do you want to do? You want to commiserate. You want people to agree with you. And most people will do that. That's why I always say, I'll be your accountability coach, because I'm going to be the person that's going to tell you not what you need to hear or what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. And that you need people like that in your life, like, because that also keeps you out of the villain trap. When you can call you and say, Richard, let me tell you something, give it to me straight. What do you think? And when that person says, you messed up, you screwed up, and you need to own it, we need those people in our lives.
Yeah, it's like when you tell them, you hold them to that stand, they go, and their response, I knew you'd say that. I go, well, then you're learning. Okay. Learning. Yeah. Maybe you don't need me as much as you think. Yeah, okay. Like you understand, right. Like now just have the confidence to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And hold yourself accountable.
And you're doing that out of love. You're telling people what they need to hear because you care about them. You're not trying to tear people down, but if you're coming to me for advice, and I always have a disclaimer and just say, and I ask people, do you want me to tell you what you want to hear or what you need to hear? Because if you want me to tell you what you want to hear, then we just need to hang up the call, because it ain't going to go that way. Are you ready to hear what you need to hear? And if they are, it can be a really, really powerful thing for people to hear the opposite. What else could be true?
Yeah, it's there's a Paul in the Bible. Okay, Apostle Paul said, "There's many teachers, but there's very few fathers." Okay, so and you're talking that father is like, I got to tell my kids things that they ain't gonna be happy. Okay, and I have a little saying in our house when I do that. You know what I tell them? You can thank me later. That's the theme. They're like, yeah, we can thank you later, right? Exactly. You can thank me later. Yeah. You might be 30. You'll say Dad was right. Okay. Cause I have to make those decisions. Okay. As a leader of my family, so it's true. Good stuff. Well, Chris, this has been awesome. Okay. So let's first, where can people get your book? Follow you, whatever they got to do. Let's get that info out there.
The book. Yeah, and the book is available on Amazon. It's called The Villain Trap, and it's available in hardcover and then also ebook. The audiobook will be out probably in 2 weeks. You'll be able to find that on Audible. Really, I really challenge people to go and read this book, because even if you're not a leader in the business world, you're still a leader, like I said, at home or in your church or wherever that is. And I would challenge you, and I would tell people, it's going to be a difficult read if you do it correctly, because it's going to force you to face some things about yourself that you may not want to, but it's a liberating read. And I will tell you, it is absolutely worth it. So I'm humbled every time somebody reads it. I'm humbled every time I get a piece of feedback that says this book helped me. It isn't about money, Richard. That's what I tell people right out of the gate. I didn't write a book to make money, because it's almost impossible to do that. I wrote a book in the hopes of helping people change their lives.
Yeah, well, I tell people, this sounds like it's a highlighter book. Don't begin unless you got the highlighter in your hand. Because I think you're going to be highlight a lot of stuff when you read, man.
Yeah, I've had people say, Chris, I'm going to read this book every 90 days as a refresher. And that makes my heart happy, because that's exactly how I intended people to use it.
Well, the great books are like that. I don't mean the great classic, like here's whatever. I mean the books that are so, like I said, so jam-packed with actionable stuff. Yes. Right. Like you can get cool stories and all, but these are things I can do. Like you said, check boxes. It's almost like a workbook. That's powerful stuff. And you're never getting it all the first time. Yeah. Come on, man. We got 30 plus years doing this stuff.
That's right.
You're not going to get that in an hour and a half read.
Yeah. No,
okay. It's just reality is going to take a few tries. Right. And then the actual application. So I love it. I love it, Chris. And I can't thank you enough for coming on today. This has been an awesome discussion, as I knew it would. You far exceeded the time frame we talked about, but it's all good. What we mean by that, everybody, is the bad time. So this is awesome. When we hit an hour plus, it's magnificent. I love it. So, Chris, thank you for this.
Thank you.
We'll again, everything will be in the show notes, guys. Look up, get The Villain Trap, get this, and just start reading it, man. Just open your mind a bit, get that highlighter, start going through this stuff, because we really need you to be an outstanding leader in your business.
Amen.
Okay. Understand what that means. And for everyone else, we'll see you on the next STS podcast.
Thanks, Richard.
And don't forget, revenue feeds the ego, profit feeds the family. So if you want to see how I can show you at least $100,000 in hidden annual profits in less than 3 minutes, and not only show you where, But how to create that 100K in 6 months or less without additional advertising or marketing spend? Guaranteed? Just go to sharpenthespiritcoaching.com. See how truly simple it is. That's sharpenthespiritcoaching.com. Do it now.